Coming up on tonight's episode of Faith versus Culture, how we can try to put our faith first in 2022. A conversation with best-selling author Valerie Burton coming up next.
To have sex before you marry is a bad idea.
Don't tell me there's no such thing as gun violence.
That just depends on your definition of when life begins.
There are problems of sin and habit that cannot be solved outside the person of our Lord Jesus Christ.
Well, hello and welcome to this episode of Faith versus Culture right here on the CBN News Channel. My name is Dan Andros. I am the managing editor of faithwire.com. Joined as always by Billy Hallowell, also of CBN's FaithWire. What's going on, Billy? Happy New Year to you.
Happy New Year. Excited to be here starting the fresh new year.
Yeah, and this is that time of year. Everyone has the best intentions, right? Like, you just think, all right, it's resetting. Here we go. I'm all in. Me personally, I've been building up the gym equipment in my garage out here and the spare side of the garage, and
it's going to stay.
I know. Well, when I bought that, because I went on Facebook Marketplace and I was just hounding Facebook Marketplace everywhere, and I found some used stuff that people were getting rid of, and I got the bar, the dumbbell bar, and I actually kind of was just looking at it, and I had this feeling that I was just transferring it from his garage to my garage, and it was just. That was kind of its fate. It was just going to be sitting in my garage doing nothing, like it was sitting in his garage doing nothing. I've been using it, so thankfully that's going well. But the point is, this is the year of ambition, the time of the year of ambition where we are, our eyes are bigger than our stomachs, and then, check back in a few weeks, and sometimes these things fade away. So what we're going to be talking about, especially from a faith perspective here today, and I'm excited to bring in Valerie Burton here in just a minute, but talking about how can we actually stick to this stuff, because it's not always easy.
Yeah. Well, and we're coming off of 2 years now almost of complete chaos that's sort of uprooted everything in so many people's lives. And so the normal struggles that people had, I think for some people it's 10, 20 times harder to just do normal life right now. And so that to me is sort of a deeper reason to kind of recalibrate as we enter into this new year.
Mm-hmm. All right, well, let's go right over to our guest here and bring in Valerie Burton, who's a best-selling author. Latest book, Get Rid of the Guilt, Stop Beating Yourself Up, and Take Back Your Joy. And Valerie, welcome to the program.
Hey, Dan, it's good to be here. Hi, Billy.
Hey. So, Valerie, I've got to start here because you heard what I just said. We've had all of this chaos. We've all lived through, and we're still in it. It's not really done yet. And so many people's lives have been upended. What would you say is sort of the key to, and I know this is sort of a loaded question, but snapping out of that? You're in this mix, we're feeling kind of stuck. How do we take the steps to move forward in our faith in this new year to make change?
Well, it's so important that we just start with, where am I? And sometimes I think, especially when things haven't gone as planned, it can be hard to accept where we are, because it's not where we plan to be. So I think first and foremost is kind of level setting and saying it is what it is, right? Even if I had planned for it to be a little bit different, where do I want to go from here? And then just really tapping into your values and your vision. What is it that is really important to you? What goal would really, really move the needle in a meaningful way? So being able to ask, what matters to me in 2022? When I get to the end of this year, looking back, what will I wish I had done? And so setting those goals from a place of values, a lot of times it's things you'd like to do more in your relationships. Maybe you aren't as present with your kids as you would like to be. You don't want to admit it, right? But, maybe they're saying, hey, can you get off the phone while we're watching the movie, right? So you might set goals that are just around showing up in a way that's more reflective of who you really are and what you really want to see. And the same with health goals. I mean, the health goals are great, but being able to be clear about why you're doing it, why does it really matter, can give you this place to persevere from, because purpose really does fuel perseverance.
You heard Dan talking about his dumbbells and everything there. That's where that one came from. You know, Valerie, one of the things that I've always loved about you is that you approach things from faith, right? You know, there's a lot of people out there who are doing what you do, but you're really unique because it brings people back to what is the foundation, right? And for Christians, our foundation is Christ. And I wanted to throw a verse out, and I know you recently had shared this in a Christmas piece that you did, but it's John 10:10. The thief comes only to steal and kill and destroy. I have come that they may have life and have it to the full. Yeah. And I wanted to throw that verse out to you. Like, what does that show us about what God has for us and what Jesus came to do?
Well, there are a couple of things. As a coach, the first thing I always think, which isn't the way most people look at that scripture, is that was Jesus's mission statement. Like, if you ask, what was his purpose of coming to this earth and living those 33 years? Everything he did was so that we might have life and life more abundantly. It's such a simple purpose statement, but whether you're looking at him healing the sick or teaching or even dying on the cross, all of it was for this core purpose. And what that says to me is, number one, our God is a God of purpose, but also all of us have a purpose. And one of the things we need to be able to do is to say in a simple sentence, what am I here for? How is someone's life better because they cross paths with me? And so when we have that sense of purpose, whatever we're doing, whether we're making financial decisions or relationship decisions or career and work decisions, we can go back to our purpose and say, is this fulfilling more of what God created me for? Because when you get to the end, you want to be able to look back and you want to know that God would say, well done, that you've done what he called you to do.
Mm. I want to talk about your book a little bit too here as we go through the program. Let go of the guilt, stop beating yourself up, and take back your joy. And we just had on this show a couple of weeks ago, we're talking about the Beatitudes, and I saw you touch on this in a recent talk, and about how the blessed in all the Beatitudes is really about happiness and joy. And I think culture can so sort of define joy and happiness, and so often tie it to our stuff, tie it to our things. I want to get your take and what you were going after there with the book.
When I wrote Let Go of the Guilt, partly it was, I would mention guilt often as related to parenting, right? So when I would travel and do a speaking engagement and feeling guilty that I left, even though I was leaving just overnight and my mom might come and spend the night, and everybody was good, but I was feeling guilty. And when I would mention it, especially to women in audiences, the response is like overwhelming. All I had to say was the word guilt, and you'd hear this, oh yeah, what don't I feel guilty about? And so I began wondering what's really going on. So a lot of people won't identify their feelings as guilt. So they'll say, hey, I'm going to eat better, I'm going to work out. And when they don't, or they don't do it to their satisfaction, they don't realize they're feeling guilty. A lot of times that's because they haven't really defined what the goal is. So if I'm just supposed to eat better, and I haven't really defined what better is, it's not that hard to feel guilty. You might eat better. Yeah. Have you done enough, right? So when we recognize guilt, one of the things we need to do is to say, is my guilt taking over my decisions? So because I feel guilty, is someone able to guilt trip me? Am I doing something that I otherwise would not do? Because I feel guilty, am I now beating myself up? So it's really important that we start to notice some of those emotions that pop up that are causing us to say yes to things we really want to say no to, that are causing us to respond in ways that are really counterproductive. And so when we have false guilt, right, feeling like we've done something wrong, even though we actually haven't, that's when the guilt really can get in the way, and we really need to find those ways to let it go.
We will be back with more with Valerie Burton. Back in a second. This is Faith versus Culture. All right, we are back here on Faith versus Culture. Dan Andros here, Billy Hallowell there. We're joined by best-selling author Valerie Burton, having a conversation here as the new year begins. And we're all looking to hopefully, as Christians especially, follow Christ more closely this year than we did the last. I think that's a good goal for everybody to have. So now we're talking some practical ways. How do you do that? How do you get your mindset ready? How do you stay on course? Because it's so easy to sort of fall off there. And we were just picking up here, guys, last segment talking, about purpose and about where does our trust, do we understand and do we really believe God is in control of the things that are going on? Where are we placing that? And I think, as I kind of touched on last segment, that I think a lot of times culture can put things like joy and sort of define them wrong and have wrong expectations. Because as Billy, as you were saying, what we have in mind sometimes is a lot different than what God has in store for us.
It may be the opposite. What happens may be painful. It may be the thing we don't want. Yeah. Not everybody gets a miracle, right? Some people do though. And these things are confusing. They are.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I just want to say real quick, there's a story of that we covered here on CBN that CBN's George Thomas did. And it's just a great story of faith and trusting when you don't know, of a gentleman from Mexico who just had a strong vision that he was supposed to open this church in near the border of America and Mexico. And there was nothing there. He said there were just a few people that had big problems. There were some chickens and cows, and that was about it. And even though he had this desire to be a Haitian missionary, a missionary in Haiti, and so he obeyed and he sort of followed that and opened this church. Well, a few years later, there's the migrant crisis. And where are most of these migrants coming from? They're trekking from Haiti. So he built this church way over here in Mexico, and all the Haitians came to him. God brought them there, and they're saving people, God's saving people there. In mass numbers, and it's an amazing thing. So, Valerie, why don't you just speak to that about having trust in God's plan and what you were talking about there last segment?
Yeah, obviously, life often go the way that we planned it. A lot of our joy can be restored with gratitude. Whether you are advancing and getting the things that you want, right, and then you get used to them. That the scientists call it hedonic adaptation, right? We adapt, continually improving circumstances. One of the ways that we even get joy back in the things we already have is by being thankful for them, by noticing, right? So I bet there was a point in time where you had a vision that maybe you'd have a show, maybe you'd be hosting something, maybe you'd be reaching greater numbers of people, and then you get there and it becomes your new normal. But when you stop and you notice, wow, look where I am. Look what I get to do every day. Look at the impact that I get to make. As simple as that sounds, it changes what you're feeling here. And God tells us over and over again, we are to be thankful. We are to rejoice. But we can find really a great deal of joy when we find ways to do that, even when things haven't gone the way we want. I still hold tight to it, but there was a point in my life where I held very tightly to Psalm 37:4. Delight yourself in the Lord, and he will give you the desires of your heart. I really believe he'll place the desires in you, and he'll allow those desires to unfold. For me, that desire was happy marriage. It was being able to be a mom, right? And that was taking a very long time. In that process, it's like, okay, God, what's really happening here? I mean, I'm staying focused, and I asked you, if this isn't your goal for me, please take the desire away, because I'll go in that direction if this isn't what you want. But what I figured out for me is that timing isn't always our timing. And sometimes when we're feeling frustrated and disappointed, we just need to pray that God will give us more strength, more perseverance, more patience, that he will give us wisdom in the process. I've prayed a few times, like my birthday's coming up, I talked to the doctor. He's like, you look young, but your eggs are getting old. Like, God, do you hear me? And I heard so distinctly in my spirit in that time that God said, I need you to be happy now, not when I give you what you've been asking for.
Wow. I remember that too. I remember actually interviewing you. It's interesting, like your journey too. And as you're helping other people in their journeys, you've been very open in talking about yours and wanting these things. And that's something that I can really relate to. And if you're not careful, that struggle just keeps taking you to another thing. And then at the end, there's no gratitude at all. You've missed every benchmark along the way. What do you recommend for people? I mean, is there a check-in that we should do in prayer, a certain amount? I don't know. I mean, how do you do it in your life, I guess? Maybe that's the starting point.
Right around the time when we're in a new year, it's always good to look back on the previous year. How far have I come? What wisdom have I gained? Is there a message or a lesson I want to carry into this new year so I don't repeat the lessons I definitely don't want to repeat? Right? I think that's extremely important that we carry with us that wisdom. But I also think that just being thankful, on a daily basis, like I look back at the end of my day, what were my wins? Right? I start my morning, what am I grateful for right now? And it can be really simple things. A win could be as simple as how you engaged with your child in a difficult moment, right?
That could be a big win. Yeah.
That actually can be a very big win. The wins don't have to be, you finally reach this big goal. It's all the things you're doing along the way. And often we take those for granted. And if you're someone who's very geared towards achievement, you're very goal oriented, it can also be very tempting to skip over the milestones and focus just on, well, I didn't reach the goal yet. Well, I said I was going to do this last year and I didn't do it last year, but what did you do? Right? Acknowledge what progress you did make. And oftentimes, especially in the times we're in right now, acknowledging that it's a little harder, right? Or 2 years ago, you thought it was going to look a little different and you've adapted. Acknowledge that. Like, acknowledge the little stuff. That doesn't mean the big stuff's not important, but you begin noticing, what did it take for me to keep moving forward in spite of this? Like, what have I overcome in the last year? Where have I seen God's, his grace, his presence, his strength in my life? Because it's easy once you move past something, you solved that challenge, you moved on to the next one, and you can forget. But all along the way, God is there. And the other thing, Billy, you just mentioned the scripture, John 10:10. But I think of the first part of that scripture that says, but the enemy came to kill, to steal, and to destroy. And one of the ways that happens is those little seeds of, it's time to get to the next thing. Move on to the next. Yeah, you did that, but what about this? You didn't finish this. You just did that part. And so all of those little seeds cause us to not celebrate the abundance that Christ does provide in our lives and the opportunities that have opened up. And so we end up focusing so much on the negative that we gloss over the positive. And of course that leads to frustration, disappointment, beating ourselves up. And we don't have to do that. So just noticing when that happens and being intentional about putting a stop to it, it takes practice, but you can do it. And it's important to do it. We know the joy of the Lord is our strength, but even the research proves out that happiness, positive emotion actually strengthens us. It helps us persevere. It builds the bonds of our relationships. It helps us make better decisions. And there's a whole host of things. We set better goals when we're in a happy state of mind. So when you're practicing gratitude, when you're focused on your joy and your happiness, it actually helps you get to the things that you really want that are most important to you.
All right, good stuff there. We're going to take a break. We'll be right back. More with Valerie Burton right after this. All right, we're back here on Faith versus Culture. Dan Andros here, Billy Hallowell there. We're talking with best-selling author Valerie Burton today. She is the author of Let Go of the Guilt, Stop Beating Yourself Up, and Take Back Your Joy.
So Valerie, we talked about a lot of different pieces of the puzzle today, and there are people out there who are watching and listening to this, and they're probably feeling very stuck. They're dealing with something that has them maybe trapped. What would you say is sort of your first step for them in this new year to break free from that?
Billy, I always say the first step to getting unstuck is telling yourself the truth. And that truth often is acknowledging where you're stuck, or acknowledging what you really want. That can feel scary. You might acknowledge what you want and you're thinking, I don't know how to get it, or I don't know if I can do that, or so-and-so is going to be upset if that's what I want. And so being able to just tell yourself the truth allows you to say, okay, so if this is the truth, what needs to happen next? Fear is normal. Now, God has not given us a spirit of fear, but he always knew we would feel fear. And that's typically what trips us up. So the antidote to fear is courage. Over and over again, God tells us throughout the Bible, be strong and of good courage. Have I not commanded you? Right? And he wouldn't command us if he didn't know we weren't going to feel fear. So when you feel that fear, praying for courage, taking even small steps, brave steps, is what moves you forward. And so whether that is a conversation that needs to be had, or it's stretching out of your comfort zone in some way. Maybe there's something new you need to be doing in your work or your career or your finances. Tell yourself the truth about what you really, really want. Oftentimes, God is nudging you in a direction. Don't push back on that. Say, all right, God, I hear you. Maybe this is the year I can actually move in that direction. Will you help me? Who should I be talking to about this? Who's been there and done that? Get serious about the things that really matter. You can do it, but it really starts with being brave enough to be willing to step out of your comfort zone and to feel uncomfortable and to understand that if you're uncomfortable long enough, you have a bigger comfort zone. Now all of a sudden you start to get comfortable with the things that made you uncomfortable before.
Good work. All right. Well, I think we're out of time for today. Valerie Burton, thanks so much for spending some time with us here to kick off the new year and hopefully get people started on the right track and stay on.
Absolutely. Thank you for the invitation.
You're welcome. All right, we're back here on Faith versus Culture. Billy, that was a great conversation with Valerie, and hopefully this will keep me on task with my weights there in the garage.
Yeah, well, her talk of honesty, that's what she really got me to think more about. When we're honest with ourselves, we can move forward, follow God's will, and, do the right thing in the end.
Yeah, hopefully some good words for everybody here as we kick off the new year and get started on a path that hopefully leads us closer to God. So God bless, and we will see you next week right here on the CBN News Channel. God bless.